Somewhere in your garage, or your cellar, or the back of a cupboard, there is a pair of dumbbells. You bought them in 1998 or 2004 in a burst of good intention that lasted about 6 weeks. They are behind the paint tins now. There is a spider living on one of them. And every year you have told yourself the same thing. If I'm going to do this properly, I need to do it properly. A gym membership, a program, someone who knows what they're doing. 3 sessions a week, minimum, or what's the point? So you did nothing. For 20 years you did nothing, not because you were lazy, but because the version of it in your head was too big to start. Here is what I want to tell you in the next 20 minutes. A systematic review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, pooling 16 studies, found that the maximum reduction in the risk of dying, from any cause, from heart disease, from cancer, appeared at around 30 to 60 minutes of muscle strengthening activity per week. 30 minutes, 2 dumbbells, a patch of concrete floor. The thing you have been putting off for 2 decades is smaller than you thought. Let me show you the evidence. Let's be honest about why the dumbbells stayed behind the paint tins, because the real reasons are almost never the ones men say out loud. The first reason is the room itself. Modern gyms are not built for a 67-year-old man. They are loud. The lighting is aggressive. There are mirrors on every wall, and young men in tight shirts who move through the place like they own it. And in a sense, they do. Nobody is unkind to you. That is not the problem. The problem is the quiet, specific feeling of being the oldest person in the room, holding a weight that a 25-year-old would use to warm up. Nobody wants to say that out loud. So instead we say, we're busy. The second reason is friction. 15 minutes there, 15 back. Changing rooms. Parking. A 40-minute session becomes a 90-minute expedition. And on a wet Tuesday in February, with the light going at 4 o'clock, 90 minutes is a very long way from the armchair. And the third reason, the one that actually did the damage, is a belief. The belief that unless you train hard, and often, and properly, it doesn't count. That belief did not come from the research. It came from the fitness industry, which has never had any commercial interest in telling you that a small amount is enough. It came from magazines aimed at men a third of your age. And it has cost more men their independence in old age than laziness ever has. Because a man who believes the minimum is 3 hard sessions a week, and who cannot do 3 hard sessions a week, does 0. So let's take that belief apart with actual numbers. In 2022, Haruki Moma and colleagues at Tohoku University published a systematic review and meta-analysis in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. They pooled 16 cohort studies, hundreds of thousands of people, followed for years, and asked a simple question. What does muscle strengthening activity actually do to your risk of dying, and how much do you need? The first, doing any at all, moved the needle. Muscle strengthening activity was associated with a 10 to 17% lower risk of death from all causes, of cardiovascular disease, of total cancer, and of diabetes. The second finding is the one that should change your afternoon. When they mapped out the dose-response relationship, it was not a straight line. It was J-shaped. The maximum risk reduction, roughly 10 to 20%, appeared at approximately 30 to 60 minutes per week. Beyond that, the additional benefit for these particular outcomes tapered off. 30 minutes a week sits close to the top of that curve. So the picture is not go to the gym 4 times a week or don't bother. The picture is keep walking and add 2 short sessions of loading your muscles. That combination is where the evidence is strongest. In June of this year, a study published by researchers following 147,000 people across 3 long-running cohorts, some of them for 30 years, suggested that the sweet spot for lowering mortality risk might sit higher, at around 90 to 120 minutes of strength training per week. And there was one more result, which is the practical heart of this whole video. When the researchers looked at people doing both muscle strengthening work and ordinary aerobic activity, walking, cycling, gardening, the effects stacked. In the combined analysis, the reduction in risk of death from any cause reached around 40%. So the picture is not go to the gym 4 times a week or don't bother. The picture is keep walking and add 2 short sessions of loading your muscles. That combination is where the evidence is strongest. Now let me be straight with you about what we don't know. In June of this year, a study published by researchers following 147,000 people across 3 long-running cohorts, some of them for 30 years, suggested that the sweet spot for lowering mortality risk might sit higher, at around 90 to 120 minutes of strength training per week. So the question of the optimal dose is genuinely unsettled, and anyone who tells you otherwise is overselling. Different studies, different measurement methods, different answers. But notice what both sets of findings agree on completely. The distance between 0 and something is where the great majority of the benefit lives. Whether the ideal is 30 minutes or 100, the man who does 30 is standing on the right side of the only gap that really matters. You are not trying to reach the top of the curve. You are trying to get off the floor of it. Now the second objection, and it is the one I hear most from men your age. That's all very well, but I'm too old to start. In 1990, a study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association by Maria Fiataroni and colleagues, working with William Evans. It is one of the most quietly important papers in the history of aging research, and most people have never heard of it. They recruited 10 volunteers, not athletes, not healthy retirees, frail, institutionalized nursing home residents, with an average age of 90 years. The oldest was 96. These were people who, by every assumption of the medicine of the time, were finished. Muscle loss in old age was regarded as an inevitability, like gray hair. You managed it, you did not reverse it. They put them through 8 weeks of high-intensity resistance training. Here is what happened. Strength gains averaged 174%, not 17, 174, in 9 subjects who completed the program at an average age of 90. In 8 weeks, their mid-thigh muscle area increased by 9%, actual new muscle tissue, in nonagenarians, and their walking speed, measured heel to toe, improved by 48%. The authors concluded that high-resistance weight training produces significant gains in muscle strength, muscle size, and functional mobility among frail nursing home residents up to 96 years of age. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because the implication is uncomfortable in the best possible way. If a 94-year-old woman who needs help to stand can nearly triple her leg strength in 2 months, then whatever is going on with you at 67 or 72 or 78, it is not because the biology has closed the door. The muscle is still listening. It has been listening this whole time. Nobody has been talking to it. So why 2 dumbbells specifically? Why not a machine, a rowing machine, a resistance band, a gym? 4 reasons, and the first one is the most interesting. 1. They train your grip, and your grip is telling on you. In 2015, The Lancet published findings from the PURE study, the prospective urban-rural epidemiology study, following around 140,000 people across 17 countries. The researchers measured something almost absurdly simple: how hard each person could squeeze a handle. Every 5-kilogram reduction in grip strength was associated with a 16% higher risk of death from any cause, a 17% higher risk of cardiovascular death, and a higher risk of stroke. And then the line that made cardiologists sit up: grip strength was a stronger predictor of all-cause and cardiovascular mortality than systolic blood pressure. Now, and this is important, nobody is claiming that squeezing a rubber ball extends your life. Grip strength is a marker. It is a cheap window onto your total muscle mass, your nervous system, and your general robustness. It is a thermometer, not a cure. But here is the practical point. When you hold a dumbbell, your hand has to hold it. Every rep, every set. A machine holds the weight for you. A dumbbell does not. The measurement and the training are the same act. 2. They force each side of your body to work alone. At 60, 70, most of us have a stronger side and a weaker side. An old knee, a shoulder that never quite came back. On a barbell or a machine, your strong side quietly does the extra work, and the imbalance deepens for years. 2 separate dumbbells cannot cheat. Each arm, each leg, has to carry its own share. 3. They are self-limiting, and that means they are safer. If a lift goes wrong with a dumbbell, you open your hands and it drops. That is it. There is no bar across your chest, no machine holding you in a position your joints don't like. For a man training alone in a garage with nobody to spot him, this matters more than any other feature. 4. There is nothing to build and nothing to book. No assembly, no membership, no opening hours. They live on the floor by the door, and the entire barrier between you and a session is the decision to walk out there. And the floor itself, the cold concrete, the smell of oil and sawdust, I would argue that is not a compromise at all. That is a room where you have always known what you were doing, where the tools are yours, where nobody is watching. Most men your age have spent a lifetime being competent in exactly that room. Right. What actually happens in those 30 minutes? I am not going to give you a list of 20 exercises, because a list is what you forget by Thursday. I am going to give you 5 patterns, 5 ways a human body moves, and once you understand them, you can build a session for the rest of your life without ever needing another video. Before anything else, 5 minutes of warming up. Walk on the spot, swing your arms, roll your shoulders, do a few slow squats holding on to something. Older tendons need more notice than young ones. This is not optional. Pattern 1. Pressing something away from you. Lying on the floor or standing, pressing the dumbbells up. This is the chest, shoulders, and triceps. In real life, this is pushing a heavy door, pushing yourself up out of a low chair, pushing a car that won't start. The floor version is worth mentioning specifically. Lying on your back on the garage floor, the ground stops your shoulders traveling too far back. For men with cranky shoulders, that limit is a feature. Pattern 2. Pulling something toward you. Hinge forward at the hips with a dumbbell in each hand, back flat, and row them up toward your ribs. This is the upper back, the muscles that hold you upright. Look at any man of 80 and ask yourself why his head is in front of his shoulders. That is 30 years of pressing and no pulling, 30 years of leaning toward a desk or a workbench. This pattern is the one that keeps you standing like a man rather than folding forward into the shape of a question mark. Pattern 3. Hinging at the hip. Feet under your hips, dumbbells in front of your thighs, and you push your backside backwards while your back stays flat, lowering the weights down your legs, then standing tall. This is the hamstrings, glutes, and lower back. This is the pattern that decides whether picking up a bag of compost in 10 years' time is a normal Saturday or a trip to the hospital. Learn it light. Learn it properly. Pattern 4. Standing up. A squat, or simply standing up from a chair holding the dumbbells at your chest. There is no movement in this entire video more important than this one. Standing up from a seated position, unaided, is the single hinge on which independent living turns. When men lose that, everything else follows. The stairs, the bathroom, the house. Train it now, while it's easy, and it stays easy. Pattern 5. Carrying. Pick up both dumbbells, stand tall and walk. Across the garage and back, 2 or 3 trips. It looks like nothing. It is possibly the most useful thing on this list. It trains your grip, which we have just established is a marker of how the rest of you is doing, plus your core, your posture, and your balance under load, all at once. And it is the most honest rehearsal of real life there is. Shopping, suitcases, a grandchild. 5 patterns, 2 sets of each. Rest as long as you need between them. A minute, 90 seconds, however long it takes for your breathing to settle. With the warm-up, that is your 30 minutes. Twice a week. That is the whole program. 2 questions remain, and men get both wrong in opposite directions. How heavy? Here is the rule that will keep you training for 20 years instead of 3 weeks. On every set, stop when you have 2 or 3 good repetitions left in you. Not when you fail. Not when your form breaks. Not when you have to grit your teeth and heave. Stop while it's still clean. If you can do 15 easy reps and feel nothing, the weight is too light. If your back rounds, your face goes purple, or the last rep is a fight, it is too heavy, and you have bought yourself a strain instead of a stimulus. Somewhere between 8 and 15 repetitions, finishing with something left in the tank. That is the zone. This is not the sport of lifting the heaviest possible weight. It is the practice of giving your muscle a clear, repeated reason to stay. And how do you know it's working? not the mirror. The mirror is a liar over these timescales, and it will make you quit in week 5. Keep a notebook in the garage, a cheap one, hanging on a nail. Date, exercise, weight, reps, 30 seconds of writing. Then look at it in 3 months. You will see something like this. In March, you did 8 repetitions of the hinge with the lighter pair, and in June, you are doing 12 with the heavier pair. That is not a feeling. That is not motivation. That is evidence, in your own handwriting, that a 68-year-old body responded to being asked. That notebook will keep you going long after enthusiasm has worn off. Enthusiasm always wears off. Evidence doesn't. And progress after 60 is measured in months and years, not weeks. The Fiatarone study ran 8 weeks. Give this a season before you judge it. 2 things to finish, and both are genuinely important. First, training without enough protein is half a plan. There is a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. As we age, the same amount of protein produces a smaller muscle-building response than it did at 30. The signal gets quieter, so the message has to be louder. This is why the PROT-AGE study group, convened by the European Union Geriatric Medicine Society, recommends that people over 65 take in at least 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, rather than the older, lower figure that was calculated using young, sedentary adults. Related guidance suggests roughly 25 to 30 grams of good quality protein at a meal, spread across the day rather than loaded into dinner. In ordinary terms, a proper portion of protein at breakfast, at lunch, and at the evening meal. Eggs, fish, dairy, meat, beans, lentils. Most men over 60 eat almost none at breakfast and try to make up for it at 8 in the evening. The muscle can't use it that way. An important caution: if you have any degree of kidney impairment, or you don't know whether you do, protein intake is a question for your doctor and not for a video. That is a real medical consideration, not a formality. Second, the screening conversation. Before you start, talk to your doctor, particularly if you have a heart condition, high blood pressure, a hernia, a joint replacement, osteoporosis, retinal problems, or you are taking blood thinners or blood pressure medication. Ask them not whether you should strength train, but how you should begin and what you should avoid. Those are different questions, and the second one gets you a far more useful answer. And whatever your health status, stop the session immediately and seek medical advice if you experience chest pain or pressure, unusual breathlessness, dizziness, or pain that is sharp rather than muscular. Ordinary muscle soreness 2 days after a session is normal and expected. Sharp pain during a movement is not, and it is not something to push through at your age or any other. I want to leave you with the thought that started this. There is a particular kind of quiet grief that men your age carry and rarely speak about. It's the feeling of watching your own competence recede, needing help with a bag you'd have carried one-handed 20 years ago, taking the stairs slower, letting somebody younger move the furniture. Nobody says anything. Everybody notices. And the story we've been handed is that this is simply what happens, that it's the calendar, and the calendar doesn't negotiate. But 10 frail people at an average age of 90 in a nursing home nearly tripled their strength in 8 weeks. And the amount of work associated with the greatest reduction in mortality risk in a review of 16 studies was 30 to 60 minutes a week. The floor is far lower than you were told. The ceiling is far higher. So this weekend, go into the garage, move the paint tins, find them. Put them by the door, where you'll trip over them, because you probably will need to trip over them for the first few weeks, and there is no shame in that. That garage is not a poor substitute for a gym. It's the room where you've always known what you were doing, with your own tools, on your own terms, with nobody watching. 30 minutes, twice a week. Start lighter than you think you need to. And in 3 months, open the notebook.